People who don't believe the Bible is literal but still believe in the Bible, where do you draw the line on what is real and what isn't? In Catholic Bible class, I was taught that everything before Abraham is not to be taken literally. Interesting, that part always seemed a little sketchy for me, but as a Catholic, I believed it. I asked my teacher about evolution and dinosaurs, and she said that during creation, it is likely that there were dinosaurs because a day could have been a longer period of time than the 24 hours we know. The main takeaway I had from my religious education classes about the 7-day creation period was that the point of the passage wasn't, God made everything in 7 days. It was, Babylonian creation myths. Marduk isn't real, dude. Here, have some poetry, then we'll retell the story from a somewhat Egyptian perspective in the next chapter. Really? That was the point of Genesis. To distance the then new Judaism from Babylonian religions? The first chapter, anyway. I remember learning about the concerning the Torah in particular, which describes it as a work woven together from various different sources with different intentions, and that seemed to be, as far as I could tell, a fairly standard hypothesis for biblical scholars for a while and might still be. Apparently, criticism of it is that it could be even more fragmented than that, not less, though, so the point that it wasn't written with a single, unified purpose is probably fairly safe to say. I mean, chapter 2 of Genesis goes on to describe the same basic thing, creation, but from a different source and with a different purpose, and it's a much older story. Though distancing everyone from the foreign religions was a common theme in a lot of the Bible. Bad things happen to us when we worship the wrong gods is one of the more consistent plot threads in the Old Testament, and I get why that would be pushed when trying to bring some unity and continuity to a people returning from exile. Then you have some books like Daniel that were even written in Hellenic times, when the world was wildly different. Crazy stuff, really. I'll get lost down a rabbit hole if I start looking too much into it. Ancient history is fun. Web link. I misread that as rabbi hole and I had a moment of hoping that was akin to a hobbit hole and not more literal. Shalom. Down the Rabbi Hole would be a great name for a Torah research-based podcast though. Thankfully, we don't have to pay the troll toll. That's Norse mythology. Got to love Solomon as an example of that. Hey God, can I have wisdom? Sure, and since I respect you asking that, have some wealth and power too. First wisdom is this, don't simp for pagan girls. Years later, Solomon ignores his wisdom and simps for pagan girls. Dante's self-insert fanfiction in which he gets to hang out with his fave Virgil? Yes. Got a religion teacher that more or less told us the same. The Bible and science about evolution/the origin of things is not contradictory at all because 1, days were probably billions of years long, and 2, that made it possible for God to create more stuff before humankind, dinosaurs, the Big Bang, prototypes for human beings for reasons unknown to us. Assuming for a second religion is real and that it would be impossible for us to grasp what actually happened, therefore, the need for metaphors and that kind of stuff, the writers of the sketchy parts of the Old Testament are probably spinning in their graves at 21st century people saying stuff like Earth is only 6,000 years old. The problem with the first chapter of Genesis has more to do with just the concept of what days were. Even if we were to accept that, the days were billions of years. The sequence of creation makes zero sense. God created vegetation on the 3rd day and then created the sun, moon, and stars on the 4th day. That's a cool idea/theory, you know. Even if it may not be true, it's just very interesting. We always do it. Particularly because the day exists before a day-night cycle. That day can simply be taken as period of time, they don't even have to be the same length of time. It's the same in later in the Bible where it often used the number 40. Reigned 40 days. Fasted 40 days, etc. 40 was commonly used as today's equivalent of a whole lot. It was not necessarily a specific measurement. Similar to Chinese, in which 10,000 can just mean a crapton. That idea/theory is the widely accepted version of events in Islam. No mainstream Muslim scholar believes it's literal days in the Quran, especially because the word day was used explicitly to describe a time period different from 24 hours somewhere else, and there's also no the earth is 6,000 years old in there. The 6,000 figure comes from adding together biblical genealogies, so it's not something we'd expect to see in Islam even if one were reading the Quran with a rigid literalism. Actually, I'd say that this is almost certainly the case, given that we define a day based on the movement of the sun and earth, when the sun was made on day 4. Not a religious person at all, although I was raised Catholic and attended Catholic school. What's even neater about that idea is look at the progression of the 6 days of creation and you basically see this order: creation of matter and energy, let there be light, then atmosphere, ocean, land, and plants, then sun, stars, moon, and seasons, then sea creatures and birds, then land animals, with a strong focus on mammals for some reason, then humans. So aside from some weird choices like plants existing before the sun, it practically matches the order of events science points to as well, so in theory you could believe it was some divine inspiration to give ancient people this close of an understanding, doubly so if you interpret the biblical day as millennia. Of course, it's not inspired that way, imho, partly because it's wrong in a couple ways: the sun created after plants, birds created before land animals, but it does show a pretty good logical conclusion about the evolution of the earth and life, so it'd be nice if Christians would use this to support evolution rather than dispute it. I don't know about other churches, but the Catholic Church supports the Big Bang Theory and I believe evolution also. Probably helps that a Catholic priest is the first, if not one of the first, to create the Big Bang Theory. The ordering is almost certainly poetic, and it follows a clear pattern, with the plants being the odd thing. We have 3 days of separating, light from dark, sky from sea, land from water. Then we have 3 days where each of the things created by the separation is filled in. Day and night are filled in with sun, moon, and stars. The sky and sea are filled in with flying and swimming creatures, and the land is filled in with land animals. The ordering is quite obviously a creative device when people aren't trying to read it as a literal historical description. A day from God's point of view could be literally anything. He's an omnipotent being. It's pretty arrogant of humans to just automatically assume God experiences the exact same day/night cycle as Earth does. He literally doesn't live here, it's explicitly stated. The Bible actually states at one point that to the Lord, a day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is day, so you've got a point. I have always heard that the original writing is an idiom that literally translates to 1,000 years, but the idiom actually means an indeterminably long amount of time. Much like 40 days and nights is another way to say really effing long time. I was blessed to have a dad who literally taught religion. He was a professor. He explained something to me once in a way I never forgot. He said, when you read in the Bible that the streets of heaven are paved with gold, it doesn't mean that there are 14-carat streets in heaven. It means that that is the value gold has in heaven, you walk on it. There is my line. Thank you, Daddy. 1937 to 2014. That's a really beautiful way of putting it. I hadn't really thought of it that way. It's not that there are immeasurable riches in heaven, it's that gold is as worthless as dirt. God is the true treasure. C.S. Lewis says something similar in Mere Christianity. Basically says we can't comprehend what heaven is like because it's not of this world, but the descriptions use things we do understand. That just blew my mind away. It sounds like your dad was an amazing person and an even better father. I had a professor in college for a class called Science and Religion. It was a Lutheran affiliated but we don't shove it down your throats Division III private school. I went there for chemistry and took this class as my central curriculum mandated religion/philosophy class. In it, we read both theological and scientific texts and discussed how they intersected or diverged from each other. One day, week, month? I can't remember, we discussed whether the first chapter of Genesis is literal or not. Did God create the universe in truly just 7 of what we today consider to be days? The professor, a Lutheran minister himself, pointed out that the common scientific understanding of what happened in the Big Bang hypothesis of the universe's origin is that it took nearly 200,000 years for the energy of the universe to cool to a point where that energy could coalesce and form photons. Before then, there literally was no light, because there were no photons. And so he said, and God said, "Let there be light." And wrapped the lecture with that as an intersecting point. That day could have been 200,000 years, and maybe that marked the end of the day on which he created light. I don't study or follow religion much at all. I was raised, got married in, and currently belong to a Catholic church, and my 1-year-old was baptized there, but I don't do much Bible study or anything like that. Your comment about the worth of gold in heaven is the first time since that day in that class, over 12 years ago now, that I've had a revelation about religious teaching and faith that I think will stick with me for the long haul. So thanks to your dad and thanks to you for carrying the message on. This might be the most reasonable discussion of religion on a Reddit post I've seen in a while. No crazy Bible thumpers, no mean atheists, everyone just engaging meaningfully, believers and non-believers. It's nice to see. Original poster replies. The fact that it's March coupled with this unprecedented cordial behavior on Reddit has me convinced it actually is the end times. Haha. Just remember Jesus' disciples all thought the same thing, it could be a while. Or it could be tomorrow. It'll come like a thief in the night. Better be ready. It'll come like a thief in the night. Through the back window, you left open, because you forgot to close it, after blowing out a huge dab hit when your kid walked in? Then he trips all over the kid's toys and crap? FBI data shows that half of all reported burglaries occur during the day though, when you're at work. Okay, I was thinking the same thing. I have seen like 2 comments that didn't promote reasonable discussion, and that's because they were short and sarcastic. This is refreshing. It's good framing of a question. Frame it differently and everyone gets triggered. You'll come across people from time to time, like Op, who know how to ask a question in a way that generates good discussion. It's a great thing. Not to imply that everyone else isn't contributing to this good energy. They for sure are. Just that framing a question is a good skill. I've seen a few of each, but it's far more civil than I thought. And it doesn't even have a serious tag. God is love, bro. It's people that mess this stuff up. The Bible is a collection of works written by people at the time. So when you study the Bible, you are studying the letter that Paul wrote to the Galatians, for example. Some of the historical events in the Bible have been independently confirmed as having occurred. Some have not. Some of the stories are embellished, some may be parables. For the parts that have not been historically confirmed, it's up to the reader to decide for themselves whether they're reading a literal retelling of a historical event or a parable written by the author. Believing that the entire Bible contains nothing but literally factual historical events requires a level of cognitive dissonance and mental gymnastics that I've never been able to achieve. This is pretty much as I have come to believe. One must remember that it was written by humans, no matter how it was inspired. Furthermore, it has been translated by humans. I believe this is why Jesus spoke in parables. The details of the story are not important, but the thrust of the meaning is extremely important. For instance, was there really a prodigal son? I don't know, and it makes no difference. The value of the parable is the attitudes and response of the story characters, not the literal truth of them. Furthermore, it has been translated by humans. This is what really gets me. Like, I'm for LGBT+, rights anyway, hell, I'm part of that group, but how can I know what the original writers meant for me to believe when, from what I've heard, the original text for that Leviticus passage is actually forbidding either sleeping with young boys or sleeping with males you are related to? Is that true? I don't know. I don't know Hebrew, and even if I did, I don't know ancient Hebrew. A diary from 1921 saying that the writer has started following a particular person means something very different than a diary today saying that they've started following someone. You know how the phrase God-fearing Christian exists? That always bothered me because why would you think fearing God is a good thing? Turns out, fear used to mean, to be aware and respectful of the power and authority of something. Language changes so easily. I'm Christian, but I just. At this point, it's more because the one time I really sat and considered that maybe he doesn't exist, it just made me feel lonely. Lonelier than I have ever felt in my entire life, and I say this as someone who generally prefers to be alone. I felt so lonely in the middle of a campus with thousands of students. Frankly, I'd rather believe in something I have no proof of than to experience that loneliness again. Maybe it's selfish of me, but as long as I don't discuss it without someone else bringing up religion first, and as long as I don't punish, via lecture, shunning, voting against the rights of others, whatever, anyone who does not share my beliefs, I don't see how it hurts anyone. Edit. I think I thanked everyone for the awards. If I missed you, sorry, I had a lot of messages. Also, I'm disabling inbox replies, and I'm not even going to try to respond to all of you. I appreciate both the kind words and the debates, though. There was a great example of this sort of thing happening just yesterday on /r/AskHistorians. Through a chain of translations, a modern author accidentally wrote a new English source talking about scandalous medieval women's clothing, but the Redditor went back and found that the original Latin text was and women's wear wasn't mentioned at all. Completely changes the meaning due to a misunderstanding. Web link. Reddit link. Reminds me of this story a priest told me once. A new monk arrives at the monastery. He is assigned to help the other monks in copying the old texts by hand. He notices, however, that they are copying copies of the original books. So, the new monk goes to the head monk to ask him about this. Worried that there may be errors, the head monk says, "We have been copying from the copies for centuries, but you make a good point, my son." So, the old monk goes down into the cellar with one of the copies to check it against the original. Hours later, nobody has seen him. So, one of the monks goes downstairs to look for him. He hears sobbing coming from the back of the cellar and finds the 75-year monk leaning over one of the original books crying. He asks, "What's wrong?" "You effers," he says, with anger and sadness in his eyes. The word was celebrate. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.